All right, how's it going today? My name is Buddy Rich, and I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about what is user experience, and this is kind of to wrap up over this whole month of what we've gone ahead and learned, from our own experience of using applications that we might not have used before, seeing things from a different point of view, not from a developer side, but more of a user standpoint. So what do I understand about UX? UX is the user experience. Um, Basically, UX is something that creates what type of enjoyment or dissatisfaction that the user is going to have. Most users pick up a device, and when they look for an app, they look for the prettiest app that has the best reviews, that does the thing they want to do the quickest. So that's and the reason why they want that stuff is because they want to be happy when using it. They want it to make their lives easier. They don't want it to make their lives more complicated. When somebody has to spend tons of time on a phone, or it doesn't work how it's intended to, they can become really frustrated with it, and they'll probably never use your app again, and maybe not use any apps that you ever put out due to the one bad experience. So why does it matter? That matters hugely, because if your UX is terrible and users sit there and they realize that you have something that's displeasant to them, and they go ahead and it never gets changed, they're going to associate that with anything you do. So putting a product out there that gives a good user experience will keep people coming back to see what the next item is, to see what the next thing is. This is when people start to become loyal, because they fall in love with your stuff. They actually love using it because it has made an impact on their life, whether it be easier or a way to communicate with friends or a way to bank. As long as they're able to do what they want to do in 5 to 10 seconds, and they're happy and they get a good emotional feedback from them. If somebody's upset and frustrated and they're like, "Come on, hurry up," that's a bad user experience, and that matters because that's going to affect you as a developer here in the long run. In what ways will you design apps differently? That's a great question, because we want to design apps based off what the users need and what they want, and what's a necessity compared to what's something that would be a nice feature to have, but it doesn't appeal to everybody, so it's not a must-have. I'll design them differently by looking at it from a point of view of who is going to be using this app. Who's it for? What are they going to use it for? Is this a practical use that they would use it for? These are all things that I will now look at as a developer, in ways that I design my apps, and ways that I'll be able to make them run quicker and faster by using some of the programming techniques that I've learned this month with queuing stuff. And so what criteria will I be using to evaluate? I'll be using a plethora of criteria to evaluate my apps. Just like we talked yesterday with the testing of your application, there was tons of things on there that we, hadn't even thought of, from that perspective, but it really put a lot of things clear. I'll be using a pretty strict criteria, but it really all depends on who the app's for and what's it intended to do. That depends on the criteria that I'll use to evaluate my app. And also I want to see, how people enjoy it. Like, what's the response that I'm getting from users when they're using it? I want them to have a happy, a good user experience while using my app. So, that's some of the stuff that I'll be using. How'd they feel about it? What was something that they would absolutely have to have in this app? Were there any parts that they got caught up on? Stuff like that to evaluate my apps. And what have I currently learned by looking at the UX of other apps? Other apps do things really well, but a lot of times you see an iPhone version that ends up on an iPad, instead of them creating the iPad version as well as an iPhone version, or giving me some more functionality with things that I'm going to most likely be using at home, which is my iPad. I'm not really going to be using my iPhone to do a lot of stuff with my apps, I would be using my iPad or my MacBook Pro. So with having more functionality and the apps that give you the more, or the devices that give you the more space, that could lead to a better UX. Because it's different. You know, a lot of people complained about the iPad versions because people aren't taking that extra step to actually develop something that's for that iPad version, as well as, okay, here's the iPhone, but hey guys, it's a little bit different now. This is our iPad version. So to be able to change between stuff like that has really opened my eyes with other UX. You know, you don't really realize it too much until you're sitting there with, you know, both apps, comparing them side to side. Then you can start to realize that stuff. And what have I learned from reading the HIG? The dreadful HIG. I've learned a lot of stuff. You know, I've learned what size, you know, a minimal of 40 pixels when clicking in, especially on an iOS device. The types of layouts, what to stay away from, what to stay with. You know, with Apple, they're very, very strict about what they want you to do. You know, they create the splash screen you create is like your logo, and they create into a splash screen. You know, stuff like that. All the icons have to be similar. They have to be created the same way, like the same style, with like font textures and stuff like that. Apple's very, very, very strict on what they allow you as a developer to do. They want everything to, you know, follow these specific iOS guidelines. What I did find interesting while reading the HIG is the way that they recommend you lay out stuff. They recommend you use the default settings in most of your applications. Unless you're creating the next, you know, Facebook or something like that, they say to, you know, stay with what they recommend and don't veer off from it. You know, so your button styles are going to be the same. You don't want to switch stuff up because iOS users are used to the same stuff, so you want that to be part of what you're doing. So that's about it. I hope that answered all the questions. I had a great deal of fun in this class and learned a lot about how people view my apps. Take care and talk to y'all later.